This is chapter 11.4, The North Takes Charge. So we have an idea that the North is going to end up winning the Civil War. As we can see today, the United States is still one country. It is not split into the Union and the Confederacy. Our objectives: describe Grant's siege at Vicksburg, summarize the key points of the Gettysburg Address, and summarize the final events of war leading to the surrender at Appomattox. We're starting with the battle at Gettysburg. Now, this battle is a brutal battle. It lasts 3 days, and it's also a turning point in the Civil War. Up until this point, we have a lot of battles sort of being tied, where the North nor the South is really leading. But it all changes with Gettysburg. So before the battle, we have the South actually defeats the North at Chancellorsville. This is proving to be sort of a positive point for the South, for the Confederates. But what ends up happening is we have the famous Southern general, Stonewall Jackson. He is actually shot by his own men. They thought that he was from the Union, and they shot him in the arm. And he doesn't actually end up dying from the shot. He ends up dying from pneumonia about a month later. So one of the South's strongest generals is killed. Lee, remember Lee we talked about last week, he is from the South. He decides to try and push north. So he goes from trying to be defensive in the South to trying to be offensive. He wants to force the Union troops to back off of Southern land. There ends up being this 3-day battle, and this is the turning point. And the result is Lee's army, they end up getting destroyed and bounced back. This is the Battle of Gettysburg. Day 1. No one planned on this battle. This battle was surprise for both sides. What ends up happening is we have a Confederate troop. They are actually looking for footwear, and they are planning to meet with Lee's soldiers. While they are planning on meeting with Lee's soldiers, they actually end up running into a Union army. The Union army, they immediately take the defensive. They are sort of ready to attack. They're not going to be the first people to attack. So if you can imagine this troop with no shoes, they are now in a conflict with a Union troop that they were not planning on being in conflict with. The Confederates, they end up being able to take the town, but this is not enough because the Union has sort of a higher position. They are a higher above ground than the Confederates. And Lee knows that he needs to knock the Union sort of off of this higher ground. Now, this higher ground is called Cemetery Point. Day 2 of the battle, everyone has now rushed to this area of Gettysburg from both sides. So we have troops from the north numbering 90,000 and troops from the south, 75,000 men, and they're all rushing to get to this battle. Lee, he ends up wanting to attack Cemetery Ridge. Again, this is where the Northerners have an advantage point. They're sort of above the Southerners. The South is successful at gaining some northern ground, but the Union, they still have a very strong defensive line. So the South has not been able to go through the Northern's defensive line. Day 3. Lee, again, is trying to break through the Union's defenses. The Union sort of plays a little game. They end up falling completely silent. And when they fall silent, Lee is sort of thinking that maybe they've retreated. So Lee starts to urge his Southern soldiers to push forward into this area of Cemetery Ridge. As they are almost reaching the Union's lines, they are fired upon by the Union soldiers. So basically the Union was keeping almost silent until sort of luring the Southern army into their line and then firing at them. This almost destroys Lee's army. So Lee, sort of in a panic, pulls back and tries to circle around the Union's army. But while they're trying to do that, they're met by another Union troop. The end of Battle of Gettysburg ends with Lee is forced to retreat, and he has already lost 28,000 men. So he started with 75,000. That's almost 30% of his men have been killed during this 3-day battle. So here we have is sort of a picture of Gettysburg. So as you can see, here, these are going to be the Unions. They have the American flag, and here in the background we have the Confederates. So looking at the map, the Confederates are starting in Virginia, and they're walking up, they're trying to find footwear, and here's where the battle starts, in Gettysburg. This is the only battle where the Southerners are actually trying to attack Northern land. Remember, the Southerners, they were trying to play more of a defensive war. They didn't have a strategy to attack the North. Immediately after Gettysburg, we have another battle. This is at Vicksburg. So Grant, he is that famous Northern general, Ulysses S. Grant. He is able to take over Vicksburg, which is the last hold that the Confederates have on the Mississippi River. Now, if we remember the military strategy of the North, the Anaconda Plan, their plan was to take over the Mississippi so that the Southerners could not really transport food and other export goods they need. And Vicksburg marks the success of this plan. So Grant is now in complete control of the Mississippi River. The Union now controls all cross points. And this also marks the point where the Confederacy is now cut in two. So we have states are divided. They cannot communicate easily with each other. This marks another major blow to the Confederacy. This is sort of an image from the Battle of Gettysburg. As you can see, Gettysburg was quite a bloody battle. We had tons of corpses sort of lying on the ground. So many so that they couldn't really even bury them all. After Gettysburg and Vicksburg, the Confederates' morale ends up becoming very low. They are not very positive about how this war is going. And it's not only low because of how many deaths are happening, but a lot of the farms are suffering in the South, and that is their way of life. If they don't have people taking care of these farms, they don't have money. So people in the South, they end up abandoning their positions as soldiers, and they're going back to help their farms. Other people in the South, they decide that they're going to fight for the North. They start to realize the North is winning, so we might as well switch sides. Another thing is that the government is starting to deteriorate in the South, and so that makes it hard for Jefferson Davis, the president. He's not really able to govern very well. And the last thing is that many people in the South are sort of tired of fighting. They really just want to have peace now. We have another shift in war when we introduce a guy named General Sherman. Now, General Sherman, he is depicted right here, he is from the Union, and he believed in this idea of total warfare. So we have Grant, who's consistently attacking Lee. Grant is in the north, Lee in the south. But what Sherman ends up doing is he believes that they need to destroy everything in the path while they're marching southward. This includes civilians, so women, children, anything to do that will help the Confederates. He believes that the women are making weapons to help the Confederates. He believes that having farms will help feed the Confederates. So he believes in destroying all of it. And so he starts what we call is Sherman's March. And on this march, he basically just destroys everything in his path. This again sort of marks a weakening point for the Confederacy. They are having a hard time bouncing back from this as well. So here we actually see General Sherman's march. Here we have Sherman in the blue line. So Sherman, he ends up marching sort of along here. He goes to Savannah. He's able to attack in Savannah. and he starts making his way up towards Richmond. So this is what we call as General Sherman's March. And here we go, General Sherman's March again. So again, you can see he's destroying everything, houses, railroads, everything is being destroyed, not just fighting soldiers. We do finally have the war come to an end. The war is basically the South, they end up surrendering. So this is a meeting, of course, Lincoln with his two major generals, Sherman and Grant. These are the two generals. So what marks the end of the war is we have Sherman, he is marching towards Richmond, and we also have now Grant, who is over here, he is starting to march towards Richmond as well. Now remember, Richmond is sort of the capital of the Confederacy. When both of these generals are marching towards Richmond, basically the South has realized they have lost. And Jefferson Davis sort of abandons Richmond and ends up destroying the city so that the Northerners can't officially take it. Eventually, we have a meeting with the Confederates and the Union, and this is sort of the official surrender at Appomattox, the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. And this is where they sign to end the war. Now, Lincoln was being quite generous. He did not want to have any sort of negative feelings in this surrender. So he actually was able to give the Confederacy some rights, even though they had lost. But, of course, there's a lot of negative feelings left after this war. We still have some division. And we're sort of going to see a forewarning of what's happening with that next week. So what I would like you to do is your questions for this chapter is I want you to compare the three major generals that we're talking about. This is General Ulysses S. Grant in the north, General Sherman, who is from the north, and General Lee from the south. And I want you to decide, who do you think is the best out of the three of those generals? The second question I want you to ask is, do you agree with this idea of total warfare if it leads to war ending? So discuss, what is total warfare? Do you agree with it?